You're listening to the Clear Creek Resources podcast from Clear Creek Community Church. To hear more, check out clearcreekresources.org.
David and Emily, thanks for being here today. So let's jump right in. Tell me about what you guys do for work.
Okay, I'll go first. I am an assistant professor at the University of Texas Medical Branch down in Galveston in the Department of Nutrition, Metabolism, and Rehabilitation Science. It's a huge mouthful.
Yeah, so make that simple to understand.
So, as a professor, what I do, I have two main components to my job. I do research and I do teaching. And so my research, I'm interested in aging. As we age, we lose muscle. So I'm looking at ways we can prevent that. So I write grants and get money and do research projects to look at that. And then I write up my results and people hopefully read those. Right. And then for teaching, I teach students, specifically dietetic students, so future dietitians, about how our body processes the food that we eat. So that's
got it. And so these are medical school students.
They are
nursing.
They are dietitians. So a dietitian is someone who's an expert in food and nutrition, and those are the people that you should be listening to.
Got it.
So,
all right. I feel already not very qualified to finish this conversation. David, what about you?
Sure. I'm a group lead over at NASA's Johnson Space Center, and I lead a team of people that do planning for future missions. So Boeing's Starliner spacecraft, and then all things Artemis. So Artemis is our missions that are going to be going back to the moon and putting the first woman and next man on the surface. And so I lead that team of steely-eyed missile men and women. That's pretty fun.
Played.
They get to sit in the control center and do the fun stuff, and I get to be the middle management above them,
right,
if you will. And then I've also got a few side hustles in my quote unquote not spare time. I'm the CIO and founding member of True Anomaly Brewing Company up in town, and then in that sliver of time I have left over, I do some real estate investing, single family home rentals, and fix and flips.
Got it. So you guys are busy. And to top it all off, you have a lot of children.
We have a lot of children.
We got kids coming out of our ears.
Yeah. How many kids and what are their ages?
We have 5 kids.
Okay.
Our oldest is 7, and we have a 5-year-old, an almost 3-year-old, and then our surprise twin 1-year-old girls.
All right.
Yeah, one for number 4, and God has a sense of humor, so I end up
Yeah.
with twins.
I know it's fine. Yes.
So, I feel like maybe it'd be better to just take a nap instead of record a podcast.
That would be preferable, yes.
All right. So let's talk about what it's like to be in the marketplace, doing all the things you guys are doing and following Jesus. So, I guess let's talk first, though, about all the busyness that you experience. How do you find a balance in your life between work and family and other work and side hustles and everything else?
That's a good question. I would say it just takes a lot of readjustment and just grace for yourself that some days I'm going to be a really good assistant professor and an okay mom, and then sometimes I'm going to be a really good mom and an okay assistant professor. So it's a lot of give and take. And I also look at, I just look at this as just a good way to also, sorry, I'm just losing my train of thought right now. So I'm going to let you answer.
Yeah, speaking of nap time.
Yeah, right.
Speaking of nap time. It's always hard.
Yeah.
It is, we're busy from the time we get up to the time we go to bed. And so it takes a lot of good communication as a couple, I would say, to figure out who's picking up who's going to be there when, what time do you need to be home to get so-and-so where they need to go. And so how do we find time? It's just a lot of, like I said, adjustment and communication, and we don't always get it right.
Right.
So,
yeah, I'd say it's also finding the prioritization of all those things.
That's
right?
true.
So we talk pretty frequently about what's a priority. Obviously, family is, and sometimes there's a season where that shuffles lower in the priority list, whether we want it to or not. That's a really difficult thing to navigate. As Emily mentioned, communication is key, and we're not always perfect at it. But it's almost a daily conversation. Also been fortunate to in some of my side hustle businesses to be partnered with some business partners who help carry that torch.
Yeah.
During seasons where I'm not available. But for the most part, we have quite a bit of flexibility. We know, for the most part now, what each other's schedules are, et cetera. And so, yeah, it's prioritizing and then finding time. We also have some ground rules for, getting home on time, protecting times.
What does that look like?
Yeah.
Well,
like-
what are some of those ground rules?
Our daycare closes at 5:30, and he has
That's
to
a
pick
pretty
up
good
the
one.
kids.
They incur a fine if I don't show up on time. So
Yeah.
we got a monetary incentive to make sure the kids are picked up. No,
Right.
but, yeah. So we, 4 kids in daycare. We're fortunate to be able to have them there, and we've got some outstanding staff that are loving and helping our kids grow. But we pick them up, in the evenings, get home, work hard to attempt to have dinner together as a family. Although sometimes I'm off putting out some small fires when I get home. Spend what time we can in the evenings before getting them down at a consistent time. Obviously, consistency with young kids is really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, but that's our daily schedule, and really what Emily said earlier, we're really just going from early in the morning till late at night. So you find those times that you try to protect to still be together in a family, and then also really not spend that time thinking about work or the things, the responsibilities that you have during the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, and we really try to protect our evenings as family time. So that means we said no to a lot of things in this season.
Yeah. So
Just-
what are the markers that get you guys there to the place where you're evaluating? We've got to say no to this.
a lot of it is what time is it? What's the cost? For us, we don't have any family down here, so we don't have backup childcare. If we are late picking someone up, I work in Galveston, he works in Clear Lake, so we're geographically all over the place as
Right.
well. And so a lot of it comes down to we have a pretty set routine. And we just really have to be careful and evaluate. We try to stay in small group. And there are seasons where we've had to step away, but that's an important thing to us. But as far as like our kids and a lot of activities after school or sports, it's just been between COVID and then having a lot of small kids, that's just not something we've been able to do right now. And I'm hoping in the next couple of years for that to be able to pick up so our kids can be able to do that. But we just physically cannot be everywhere all at
Right.
once.
Yeah, so we've had to say no to a lot of extracurriculars for the kids. Like I would have loved for our oldest Oliver to be more plugged in with say a little league or some baseball events. That hasn't panned out, or some soccer. Primarily because also on the weekends we're spending that time together as family, or working on our never-ending house project list. So,
Right.
So we try to protect that time so that we're not also just flinging the kids all over the place as well. There's enough draws for our attention. We want to make sure that they get that time as well.
Sure.
Yep. And as far as like what David said is when we get home from about 6 until the kids are in bed, it's really family time. We put away our laptops. We sometimes turn off our phones and really try and focus our time as a family. And then, if we have things we need to pick up after they go to bed from work, we can, do that. And then occasionally we'll try and spend time together as a couple, but that is hard to do right now.
Yeah.
So.
All right. And you guys have been around Clear Creek Community Church for how long?
2012.
So 10 years.
July 2012.
10 years. And you guys have been involved in a lot of different ministry areas over the years?
We have. We started out, I guess we've always been on the First Impressions team. Is that right?
Yeah, so we started going to the Clear Lake campus right after we got married in June of 2012. I dragged her down to Texas. She just graduated from Purdue. And dragged her down here. We were hunting for an Acts 29 church, saw the Clear Lake campus right in our backyard.
Right.
Walked in, and right on day one, Richard and Lily Sarpong, who were on the First Impressions team at that time, said, "Hey, you need to start volunteering. We like you." And the next
you're
week
going to be
we
in our
were-
small
Yeah,
group
right.
too.
Yeah, so it's
Perfect.
just bang right into it.
Yeah.
So and then a couple of years later we became navigators. So we've done that. So First Impressions, navigators. We were on the Group Link team
Yep.
for a long season. We've done mission trips down to the island. We've kind of
So
been.
you guys have been around church a long time, but then also followers of Jesus as you've gotten into your careers, right?
Correct.
So,
Absolutely, yeah.
it can be a challenge to connect what happens on Sunday or Wednesday at church and in small group to your Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, or, shift work, or whatever your work schedule is. The question I'm asking is, how do you connect what happens in your faith life and with your church to what's going on in your work life?
You can go first.
All right. I'd say for me, it's very easy to kind of silo or compartmentalize things just in general, right? I have to have, to be very focused on certain things throughout the day, both for my work at NASA and then when I'm shifting focus to things with the brewery or when a real estate fire crops up, right? You have to compartmentalize those things quite a bit. And I've found myself, especially in the past, compartmentalizing my faith and, conversations about my faith to those Sundays or Wednesdays
Right.
or when I'm engaged in small group, right? So it's really easy for me to slip into that because that's how I kind of have to keep my brain organized
Right.
throughout the work week. But about 6 years ago, and I forget who I was talking to, I think it was at a Navigator retreat, we were talking about this exact subject, just how everything's being balanced and how you still make time to prepare at the beginning of your day, to use work as a form of worship, right? And see how your skills that God's gifted you, the talents, the capabilities, your passions, etc., how He's gifted you those, right, to then go do the job and the work that you're doing. Don't lose sight of that, and then also let that play out. So I've started wearing my faith on my sleeve more frequently, right? I started actually.
What does that look like at NASA?
Yeah, so at NASA, we've got, highly competitive, highly competent, just amazingly motivated team members that are hyper-focused on ensuring that we have humans safely flying in space. Right. So I'm working along some of the best of the best in the entire world in this industry, and that's a humbling experience, right? And so I've found that direct approach with folks when things come up. So, life events happen with team members. They're struggling with something, or they're going through a season of loss, or maybe a season of, a season of joy. Right? I just engage with them and ask them, "Hey, can I pray for you?" I mean, right. I've literally asked team members, how can I pray for you, or would you mind praying with me? HR hasn't come knocking on my door yet when I asked them that, and I found a lot of my team members are very receptive to that. Some are a little bit more standoffish, so I just make sure that they still feel a presence and know that I'm there to support them, albeit maybe not with faith or God or Christ directly attached to any conversation. But I found that wearing my faith on the sleeve means having more direct and very transparent conversations about what my faith is and how I see God in the situation that I'm navigating with my team.
And are there other Christians that you work with at NASA in the group that you work with, or do you feel like it's just you?
I'm fairly blessed. I've got a pretty healthy mixture of folks who are very much faith-based, very much, Christians, and then I have those who are
Sure.
all the way to atheists and will argue with you quite a bit about the merits of anything faith-related. I've been very fortunate in my career to actually have direct management bosses above me who are willing to, talk about what faith looks like and how we navigate either employee issues or technical issues or how we're showing up at work and how God's reflected in that. So I've had a mixture of everything, and I've gotten good support in having those conversations.
And then how does that look for you at the brewery? Because I would imagine maybe a little different.
Yeah. So the brewery is a bit different. I've got a group of 3 other friends that I founded that with. We've been brewing together for, we started in 2008, I think. One dumb idea led to another, and we opened the brewery. But those guys, using the Creek speak, they've been in my top 5 for a long time. They don't have an active, faith. They're not Christians. So navigating that is, yes, a bit different than being at NASA, the normal 9 to 5. And I lean on those relationships with them to have that conversation. And I pray for them, and they know that.
That's awesome.
I talk regularly about that, especially when they're going through seasons of change. Several of them, a couple of them just got married. One's expecting, their first kid.
Yeah, those are big milestone moments in a person's life.
Yes, and so that opens the door for additional conversations and really being intentional about what that looks like.
And then flip the complete opposite direction. I know in your real estate stuff, it's a very different environment.
It is, yeah. So I'm partnered with actually another member at Clear Creek Community Church, and he and I, as part of our core values and vision for that company, our partnership together, Christianity is at the center of that. We have Christ-centered values that guide all that we do. Real estate itself can have a lot of shady dealings with it, and there are those that we directly conduct business with that may not have the same ethics and definitely not the same faith that we do. And so we make sure that we have clear guidelines for not only our contract employees that we bring on, but also for the clients that we interface with. They know where we stand, they know why we're doing things, and they know that we're a faith-based business. That's bold and in front on our website. So
it's like a wild mix of of everything when it comes to faith and work intersecting.
Yeah, it is. And I try not to compartmentalize those. Going back to what I was saying earlier, right? I talk with people in those different business areas about what those things look like, how they show up, and how I see similar things playing out for the different business.
Yeah. Emily, what about you? I can imagine the medical and education environment is
not especially friendly.
Yeah.
And so I have not had the same sort of open conversations that David has. So I try to take a slightly different approach in just the way that I treat people. Academics tends to be very competitive, very me-centered, because when you get into a really competitive environment, it's all about making yourself look better, and a lot of people stepping on other people to try and, compete for dollars, compete for just to get ahead.
Yeah.
And so I try to I act with a lot of integrity to show Christ's compassion and love to people in just really practical ways in the students that I mentor, to my other colleagues in the department. We went, I know several of them are going through some really difficult personal times right now. And so just being available to talk and trying to think of ways that I can serve them and slowly talk about faith with them. I know both of them are somewhat closed off to it. And so just trying to... It's hard because I don't want to say that I'm hiding my faith, because I'm definitely not, but I just have to be careful in how I talk about it. And I also have to be careful because sometimes you can be perceived as, for the lack of better terms, sometimes religion and intelligence are inversely associated.
Right.
And so, and in the field I work in, people's perception of your intelligence can impact quite a bit. And so I don't want to like I said, I don't want to downplay or hide my faith, but also talk about it in a very intelligent way and in a way that meets people where they're at. And so I think, our church did a great series on science and faith and how they're not at odds with each other. And so that was a really useful tool for me to think about how can I talk with my colleagues more about this. And at work, we went through, I had a mentor for 9 years who was my boss. He was a great friend, and he passed away about a year ago. And that was devastating personally, and even for my career was not that it took a hit, but I lost someone who I'd interact with on a regular basis. We did science together. We had a lot of fun together. We really pushed each other, and I lost that. And so having my faith really got me through a really hard time at work, and knowing that God was still in control and that He saw the loss, and that He just really ministered to me in ways I didn't expect through that. And so, and I hope that people that I work with saw that God sustained me through that.
So thinking about this conversation we were going to have today, and being a follower of Jesus and being in the workplace, I've worked at Clear Creek now for 11 years, but before that, I stepped out of a career in the construction industry, and so though it's been some time, I have lived that, and compartmentalization was the thing that was in my mind. Like, it's so easy for us to know, in this environment I act and behave this way, and in this environment I act and behave this way, and I have different priorities over here. And that's just natural for us. Mm-hmm. So how have you, one of the hopes of this series that we're doing at Clear Creek about work and the way it brings glory to God and good for the world is, how have you guys learned to follow Jesus in a way that influences your work or bleeds into work in the right ways? Because it's like you've already mentioned, it's different in different environments. So how do you follow Jesus in a way that motivates you to take Him into your workplace?
I would say for me, because I'm in the scientific arena, I see the glory of God's creation in what I study.
Sure.
Just the elegance, the beauty of the human body and how it's ordered speaks to a creator. And so that is one way that I can see Christ every day in my work. And also, I think that for me, I love being able to turn to my identity is in Christ and it's not in what I do. Because if I get so wrapped up in my identity being my my work and my that's where I draw all my value from, then it creates, I already work in a very anxious environment where, there's always, you want to be perceived a certain way and you want your research to turn out a certain way and you want your students to like you. And so if I can step away from that and say, I want to do a good job. I work to glorify God. I don't work to glorify man or to glorify myself. Then when things happen, you can rest on the fact that when you screw up, when something doesn't go the way that you want it to, when you don't get the promotion or the recognition or the award that you really wanted, that's not what gives you value.
Yeah.
It's really our identity in Christ.
Let's talk about that, though, for a minute, because, we've all, as adults, met new people, whether it's at a party or wherever you are, and what's the question everyone asks when, what
do you do?
What do you do?
Yeah.
Because that's one of the most identifying markers for us as people. So, David, what would you say to finding your identity in Christ more than just your work?
Yeah, well, what Emily was already saying resonates with me quite a bit as well. It's been very easy for me to wrap my worth around performance in my job or business conducted with some of the entrepreneurial stuff I'm doing or the accolades and recognition that comes along with that, right? Some of those items are very much public facing, and so it's easy to draw worth or a sense of accomplishment, and just lean heavily on that based on stuff you accomplish at work. But what Emily was saying about, the worth that you should, and that I've become much better at drawing from, is, hey, I am worshiping God in every day, right? How I perform, what I'm doing should be a direct reflection of the gifts and talents that He's given me, and taking time to pause and recognize that is something that I've gotten a lot better at, and I do that almost on a daily basis now, where I step into the office, kind of get into the mindset and go, okay, all right, let's conduct myself as Christ would, right? The secular side of NASA has what we call, servant leadership, right? And that's something that I include on my resume, right? If I'm applying for something, like I'm a big believer, if you will, in servant leadership. And I don't think there's a better example of servant leadership than Christ, right? And so I don't draw from the secular side's definition of what servant leadership is. I do that on how Christ showed up and how He led those to believe in Him and believe in God the Father, right? And so if I can take from Christ those same lessons and show up every day and serve my team, walk with my team members as they're solving technical problems or as they're getting ready for a mission, right? Or as we're having an argument over how best to do something, or I'm getting ready to, support a meeting to report about another meeting, right? How do I show up? How do I serve others in that season? And how can I let Christ shine through in my attitude, my approach, and the words that I say? So really, for me, it's about checking in on myself on a daily basis to make sure that that's what's showing up and not personal desires or selfish reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing, or when I'm having conversations like this one with people about why I'm doing what I'm doing,
right.
talking intentionally about, hey, I've been extremely blessed to have a background in education and talent, and I'm fortunate enough to have been hired on in this area and to be leading this team of people. Right, I'm going to do my best to make sure that brings glory to God and points directly back to who Christ is in my life.
Has there ever been a time when you didn't do some of these things well?
Yes.
I mean, right. That's maybe a
all the
silly
time,
question.
yeah.
Obviously, yes, there's been a time, but like, how do you come back from that? How do you recover? How do you reset yourself?
I'd say there's been a couple seasons where I've applied for a promotion, or I've really wanted to be assigned to something or be seen as a leader on something, and for whatever reason, I just keep failing at it, or I'm not living up to my standards, or I'm not meeting someone else's expectations. Right? Those seasons are especially hard because I tend to turn more internally, or even look externally to things beyond my control that I if I could only make these right, then it would help me get this or do that or be seen as this, right? Have this more positive perception of me. And really, what's kind of struck me is it's God's timing in these things, right?
Yeah.
And it's God's decision. Ultimately, it's His authority on whether or not I'm receiving a promotion, right? And there are things well beyond my understanding, probably still remain beyond my understanding on why things turn out the way that they do, right? That's a hard thing to trust in, right? And actually rest in what happens. We talk about resting in God's grace and in resting in our faith. That's really hard to do, especially in a highly competitive work environment, in a highly competitive business environment. You want to achieve, you want to accomplish, you want to be successful, you want to be perceived as successful, you want to be recognized for those things. You have to rest, and you have to actually rest in God's plan and not yours, because ultimately we're called to do that across our entire life, and work is no exception to that.
Right.
And there may be a season where you are quote unquote accomplishing things or being quote unquote recognized for things, but ultimately glory should be given back to God for those things and not to yourself or not to ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well said.
what's interesting to me, what I'm thinking about as you're saying that is, there are absolutely work environments where the competitive nature of what you're doing and the need to promote yourself and work really hard to be seen, all that is part of it. But that's not the only broken part of the way we interact with our work. I would say working here at Clear Creek Community Church, it's not that at all. Like, we work as a team. It's really great, but there is still something broken in our hearts, like in my heart, where you want to do a good job, you want to stand up and preach and do well, but then there's something that can happen in your heart when you get off the stage and you're like, man, that was awesome. And somehow that's about me instead of about what God has done. And so I think that that's evidence of what can happen in every person's heart, right? Whether it's church work or NASA or medical or anything else, is like your own heart is seeking glory. So how do you push against and fight against that? I'm asking.
Oh,
I'm nodding
let
like,
us know
yeah, that's
before
hard.
the
Yeah, that's hard.
answer.
Let me know when you find out.
Yeah.
But I think he's right. It is really hard to push against that. I work in the same sort of environment. You are when you're recognized, it gets you more things and gets you more. It gets you further along in your career. And I would say I've also had to combat even just being a mom, working, having a lot of kids. I don't even talk about my kids at work sometimes. Well, I do more. I work in a department that everyone has small children right now, so that makes it helpful. But there's times where I don't talk about my kids because it changes people's perception of me. But that's also a huge part, and God created me to be a mom to them as well, and their gifts. And so trying to balance all of that, because sometimes our work becomes becomes this image. Management. You want to be seen a certain way at work so that you keep going up the ladder, keep getting the promotions, but I really want what I really want is for people to look at me and see Christ's glory,
right,
magnified in my life. And how to do that in the work environment is something that I'm still working on. So.
Yeah, and I think, as Christians, when you find yourself saying something, acting a certain way, especially in like a high-pressure situation, or reacting in a certain way, even if it's internal, it's hard to check down on yourself. It's hard to pause in that moment and think about, okay, how is Christ showing up through my actions, thoughts, words, and deeds right now?
Yeah.
Right? Because, okay, God changed my heart because I'm having a really hard time doing it myself right now. It's hard to do that. I think time spent intentionally in prayer each day, time reminding yourself throughout the workday to really pause and think about that, like actively pause and think about that, are the things that have helped me succeed the most, where actually kind of hit the pause button from all the distraction and the stress and the deadlines and the conflicting priorities that we talked about earlier, and stop and pray for a moment, stop and listen. We did a prayer series a while back, and we talked about, intentionally removing distractions and focusing on prayer and your conversation with God. It's hard to do that in the workplace, but I think it's really, really important, especially in a high pressure environment, to do that, because it causes you to realize, okay, I'm not showing Christ's love in this interaction right now. Or, man, I could have handled that better yesterday, and it's been eaten at me. Why? Well, it's because I'm not letting my Christ identity shine through me there. I'm letting the selfish David identity and desire shine through there.
So, go ahead.
Oh, I was just what you were saying just triggered a thought that I think one thing that we can do to really live out our faith in these sort of high pressure competitive environments is to act it with humility. Because and not just in a shucks kind of way, but truly showing humility in word and deed, and thinking of others before yourself. Because in a situation where it's all about me and how can I get ahead, when you can think about others and their good, I think that causes people to stop and notice what you're doing.
Yeah, so has there been a time when maybe you blew it at work because you got too angry about something, or you acted in a way where like, this is not Christ-like, and you had to circle back to someone or to a circumstance because you have faith in Jesus and you're being molded into his image and all of that? Like, how did that show up in a real situation at work?
Yeah, so I've done that a few times with team members where we've been having a conversation and we're both frustrated about something, maybe not even directly with one another. Like, I'm not frustrated with the team member, but we're frustrated about a situation or something that happened, right? And so you get into a bit of a cycle of like, yeah, that stinks, right? Like, that's the dumbest thing I've heard. So I've often, when we get into that cycle, either fortunately been able to hit the pause button mid conversation, say, all right, we both care about this. Let's name and claim what we're feeling right now, right? But reality is, I think we can help the situation, or we can help this individual, or we can help move forward if we take this different tact. And I think it's because both of us are so wrapped up in how we're emotionally responding to this right now. We're not taking time to think about rational response to it, or taking the more humble approach to seeing things from maybe that person or that situation's perspective, and trying to pause and think about that. So it may not always be a direct faith conversation in that moment, right? I might not use specific faith-based language, right? But it is kind of all right.
But your faith changes your behavior.
There is no fruit of the Spirit in this conversation right now, right? There's no Holy Spirit speaking through me. Let's pause. Let me see, actually stop and listen to what is being spoken to me, and then allow that to play out, whether it be in a more professional conversation, right? Or whatever it may be. So yeah, I think very frequently that happens. Or circle back to it like the next day. Hey, we both interacted this way. I want you to understand that I care about these things. I care about this part of the situation. I care about you if it happens to be a more contentious conversation. Get on the same page, because really, again, going back to the relationship conversations that I've had at work, right, and faith-based conversations I have at work, when people see you being willing to pause and stop and approach something differently, or be more humble, like genuinely humble about things, they do pay attention, and they do gain greater trust in what you believe and why you believe it, and they gain greater trust in wanting to listen to you and have a conversation about that.
I wouldn't say I have as intensive conversations as you do at work. We're a little more laid back at UTMB. But I think what I have found, and I'm not sure if this quite answers your question, but I found that when I show genuine care for other people and spending some time to sit down and talk about, okay, here's a problem that you're facing. I can't fix it for you, but I can help you figure out some steps, and I can connect you with the right people, and make some suggestions for how you can turn around this situation. Leaves an impression on people.
Yeah.
So.
cool. So it's like a blend of a moment of discipleship and shaping, and
Yeah.
then also maybe some repentance that, you're trying to turn a different direction here.
Yeah.
That's cool. Has there ever been a time where you were surprised to have a God moment at work? Like you weren't expecting that, and then, man, whether it was a conversation or a situation. I didn't tell you this one in advance, so you weren't
okay.
prepared
Great-
for that.
And that's a great question.
Why you think? You got one?
Yeah. I had when you have a team underneath you, employees go through various, life events, et cetera. In the past, had some team members who are battling cancer, right, or had a death in the family. You can tell when something's not right, or that they're trying to be professional and be seen as professional, but really their mind, their heart, their emotions are elsewhere. And never really in a group setting, because you never want to embarrass someone, in any way. But definitely on the side, approach those folks and had some amazing just prayers, with them, talking with them about their struggles. Building upon that relationship, that open trust and communication that's already there, to let them know that it's okay to talk about life. It's okay to talk, management speak, work-life balance, right? And let them know that it's okay to protect, things that are really ultimately way more important than what we're doing 9 to 5, if you will, right? Family and relationships that they have there. And so there have been, I'm not talking about specifics, but there are specific moments, right, where there have been some just incredible conversations, I think, that I've had that were a direct result of God putting me there, allowing me to be present, and allowing his previous encouragement to me to be open about what I believe, right, to play out, so that employee felt loved, they felt cared for, that peer felt listened to, right? That the stress and the all the other emotions of the situation could be talked about at work and not have to be compartmentalized or set to the side in order to accomplish our mission at work, right? So there's been make some space and have some amazing connection and at work that I think is a direct result of God putting me in those situations.
Cool.
I'm still thinking, but I can tell you every once in a while I do run across a believer at work, and it is really awesome just to have someone that you can connect with. And I found that those relationships are often the most encouraging because I have a good friend. She works at a different institution now, but we still keep in touch and encourage each other, and then not just in a professional sort of way, but also just in our faith. And that's been really fun just to have that connection. And that, when you have a colleague and a friend who's a believer, you just connect in a way that just wouldn't just do professionally. And so to me, those are little God moments that keep me encouraged and keep me kind of grounded.
Yeah.
So.
I remember one time I was in my truck, pulled up to a job site, and one of the contractors was standing there at the edge of the street. And so I rolled my window down to say hi to him, and I had my Bible on the passenger seat, and that's the window he walked up to. And he looked at my Bible, and he was like, "You read that?" And I was like, yeah, and it was one of those conversations that I'm sure many people have had. You end up in a faith conversation you totally weren't expecting, and those two parts of your life collide. And I mean, it's really cool to see when God makes that happen.
Yeah.
All right. So last question. When has your faith helped you through a difficult time at work? I know you already talked about losing a colleague, but anything else come to mind? How having faith in Jesus and hope for God in the world has helped you through whatever you've been through at work?
I mean, I just think back to there's stressful seasons at work. The NASA job where you're unsure of how you're going to get all the tasks accomplished in the day, or just if I mentioned earlier, if you're feeling like you're not accomplishing what you want to accomplish, and you're kind of failing at some things or not meeting deadlines. There's been some recent seasons in the past 5 years where I've felt a bit lost, either in what direction I wanted to go, or a promotion opportunity that I had, strong desire for, and then ultimately not getting it, or just, a big project I was supposed to be leading, and it was struggling, and I was struggling, right?
Yeah.
And so there's those moments where it's really hard not to carry that home, not to carry that stress home to the family. Emily's giving me a look right now. Not carry that home, not let that show up on how I'm just talking with my kids, how I'm thinking and focusing on other things, right? And so in those moments, it's been very helpful to, again, pause and reflect, not to compartmentalize, but to really just kind of openly lay that at the feet of Christ and say, I need help.
Yeah.
Right. I need your help. I need to actually rest in you versus trying to just keep doing what I'm doing, which is control something that I actually have no control over. And so, yeah, I'm thinking of some specific examples just the last 5 years where I had to do that, and I had to take it to Him, and I had to actually trust that this was part of God's plan. And even though in that moment I couldn't see it, that it really was part of it. With the brewery, 2 years ago when COVID started, myself and the other founders sat down at a table on that Monday when Texas was closing everything down.
Yeah.
Right? There was not really a smile around that table, right? And we're all feeling
Yeah, because
the
you guys
pressure.
were young,
Yes.
just getting going.
Yes. Yeah,
and downtown was shutting down.
Yeah, we're a year into it. We're riding
Yeah.
this high wave of, a lot of fun, business doing well by most measures, and we are way out of position from a business standpoint when your doors are shut and that's your source of revenue, right? So I remember coming home that night and just not even wanting to talk about it to Emily, just kind of sitting there and being like, yep, we talked.
Yeah.
And I don't have a forward path. And it was one of those keep you up at night moments where you're like, okay, I don't know how we're going to get through this, but we are. Something's going to happen. I just need to trust that whatever that something is, it's God's plan for this business, for everything that we had hoped for there,
Yeah.
right? It's still open and operating, so God's plans obviously were to keep it going through that season. We had some really hard conversations in that. Fortunately for us, we all worked really well together, and I think that was because of some intentional pausing and resting in God's grace and asking Him for wisdom in that time frame, not relying on my own devices to help that. So that was a little bit of a long-winded response to your question, but I mean, ultimately, there's very frequently seasons that come up where I have to stop and lean on God and trust in Him and rest in Him throughout my workday, so that it doesn't spill over into relationships at home or really me being able to use those skills and gifts that He's given me.
Yeah.
Oh, I already talked about losing my boss, but also layered on top of that is he passed away 6 days after the girls were born, our twins. And so it was a really hard season going back to work after being on maternity leave with a difficult pregnancy, taking care of newborn twins, and then I went back to work when they were 3 months old. And so, but God really sustained me through that season. He provided, family. They were able to come help take care of us. It just met my physical needs. Going back to work was really hard because of various circumstances. There was a lot of uncertainty about what was going to happen. But I knew that I could, like you said, I could rest in God's sovereignty in this situation. I didn't know what it was going to be, and there was a lot of anxiety tied to that, a lot of not sleeping well because of that anxiety and having, twins. But in the midst of that, I knew that, I could trust Him and that He wants what's best for me, even when I don't know what's best for myself in a work situation. Because, I want to be in control. I had, when I left grad school, I had this plan of how my life was going to go, where I was going to go for my postdoc, what I was going to be doing. And I can tell you, 10 years later, this is, living in Texas with 5 kids was not part of my plan. But
You're welcome.
but it's the best thing for me because it's what God had planned for my life. And so when things are delayed, I feel like a lot of things in my life have been delayed, or I've just gone in a completely different direction because I want to be in control. But when it comes to my career and my work and my faith, they're all really tied together. I don't see them as separate because, we live our faith day in and day out. And so it is part of work, and work was created by God, and so I can find joy in what I'm doing because I'm working for Him. If I'm trying to please my boss or myself, even just myself, I'm not going to please. I'm going to walk away at the end of the day saying, "Oh, I didn't get to these 5 things." But if I can say, "Okay, today I'm working for God, and I want Him and His grace and His sovereignty and His love to be shown in my life," then you can walk away from your workday saying, "Okay, can I do that? Or did I do that?" And just rest in that He has you in the palm of His hand, and that if you're loved by Him, that is ultimately, you are loved by Him, and that's what gives your life value. And that's what I tell my kids all the time, because it's more, I'm preaching them to preach to myself. So.
Yeah. Well, thanks for taking some time out of your busy, crazy lives to at least give everyone that's listening and watching a glimpse of what it looks like to try and figure out how to bring glory to God in the midst of work, and not just find your identity there, but in Him. And when you're making mistakes and turning away from it, man, it's always helpful to hear someone else's experience. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah. Thank you, Lance.
Guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us, and great job asking us questions. Keeping us on our toes.
All right.
Hey, thanks for checking out this video. If you haven't yet, make sure that you hit subscribe down below, and check out ClearCreekResources.org, where we have videos, books, and sermons on there, as well as our audio podcast. Thanks for watching.